1 month ago this Saturday, a mob of Americans stormed the U.S. Capitol in a failed attempt to deny Joe Biden's victory in the November election. The Department of Justice has arrested and charged rioters, and the Biden administration has launched a review of what it calls domestic violent extremism. Nick Schifrin provides an update on the criminal consequences so far and the threat that remains persistent. And then Yamiche Alcindor has a conversation on the country's seemingly cavernous political divide. Let's begin with Nick's report.
They broke through barricades, assaulted police, shattered windows, and once inside, destroyed and stole property. Over the past month, the Justice Department charged more than 180 rioters.
The scope and scale of this investigation in these cases are really unprecedented.
Michael Sherwin is acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia.
This is not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to be solved within the coming weeks. It's not going to be solved within the coming months.
With each new charge, there's a clearer picture of the diverse groups who attacked the Capitol. Longtime conspiracy theorists like self-proclaimed QAnon shaman who goes by Jake Angeli, as seen in this New Yorker video.
Understand it's an IO war.
Military veterans and law enforcement, including retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Randall Brock Jr., who used a military term referring to information operations. Trump supporters who say they were swept into the crowd, like 22-year-old care worker Riley June Williams, seen here before she allegedly stole a laptop from Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office.
Proud Boys.
And law enforcement says playing a key role, right-wing extremists. Video shows members of the militia, the Oath Keepers, and 4 January 6th indictments are for members of the Proud Boys, recently designated a terrorist group by Canada. They face charges including conspiracy, disorderly conduct, and obstructing or impeding an official proceeding, which carries a maximum penalty of 20 years.
Many of these groups were very explicit about their violent intentions.
Since the 90s, retired FBI Special Agent Michael German has tracked white supremacists and right-wing militias.
There is a tremendous amount of public evidence that can be used even today to target the most violent actors. I am concerned that the FBI in particular and the Department of Justice are focusing on January 6th as if it's a sui generis event and not recognizing that many of these people had been engaging in violence around the country for months or years.
In Charlottesville in 2017, a neo-Nazi plowed his car into an anti-white supremacy protest, killing 1 woman. Most recently, at the Million MAGA March in Washington, D.C. in November, Proud Boys members brawled with counter-protesters. 1 man was stabbed. And another D.C. rally in December resulted in more clashes, multiple stabbings, and a couple dozen arrested.
All the signs were there that some of the supporters of Donald Trump were serious, they were dangerous.
Jane Holute was Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama. She says even a decade ago, federal reports voicing concern about right-wing extremism were disparaged and their authors punished. Lute says that accelerated under President Trump.
People were reluctant to put out reports of the factors that we knew were coalescing to cause us great concern on January 6th. But no formal statement was issued. And the feeling that we hear is that it was not issued because when such things were stated publicly, that individuals paid with their careers.
This was repeated activity that was not being addressed by law enforcement, which conditioned these groups to believe that this was okay. This was something they could do, which attracts more violent people who just want to commit violence, and here's a place they can do it and actually get a pat on the back rather than handcuffs.
What consequences have rioters paid? Many lost jobs. Most face charges of entering a restricted building and disorderly conduct. Far fewer have been charged with more serious crimes. No one has yet to be charged for the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who lied in honor at the Capitol this week.
There is a definition of domestic terrorism, but perhaps surprisingly to many of us, it doesn't carry any criminal penalties. And so if you're charging individuals who are intent on violence, law enforcement is having to use, as you say, other statutes and other provisions. But, the old saying, the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind. And that's what's happening here.
German says the FBI doesn't need to wait for Congress to act.
There's no new legislation that's required. The FBI has ample authority in its domestic terrorism portfolio. It's just a matter of focusing their attention and making sure that they have the direction to actually investigate these crimes.
After the attack, social media tried to stop the spread of the kind of misinformation that incited the rioters. Twitter suspended tens of thousands of accounts. The right-wing friendly social media Parler was taken down, and multiple social media platforms suspended former President Donald Trump. As the FBI continues its investigation, the nation's capital is slowly returning to normal. But 5,000 National Guard troops will remain in D.C. through mid-March. And last week, the Department of Homeland Security issued a nationwide domestic terrorism bulletin warning that extremists could continue to mobilize to incite or commit violence.
Is there still an ongoing threat moving forward?
It's the same as the threat that existed on January 5th, 2021, or 10 years before that, or 10 years before that. These groups are persistently violent against communities that don't have the kind of public platform that members of Congress have. Right. So it's important now that their attention is focused on it, that we actually understand how this impacts all segments of our society, not just the powerful.
And so today, the concern is not if, but when extremists will plan another violent event and if law enforcement can prevent it. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.